Okay, welcome everyone to the BAPT conference entitled The New Normal, People, Type and the Post-Pandemic World. I'm delighted to introduce Blair, who'll be presenting Goldilocks and the 8 cognitive processes. Sue is a speaker, author and coach who has worked with type for nearly 20 years. She specializes in taking this very complex theory that we love and providing practical, simple yet accurate ways to explain its depth. She's the author of the Personality Puzzle Coaching Cards. Welcome, Sue, and over to you.
Great, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for staying up for so long. And I'm hoping some of you are not zoomed out by now. So it's so well done. Your resilience is marvelous. So Goldilocks and the 8 cognitive processes. I guess as people who are working with type, either you're coaching or you're counseling, you're type practitioners, we're used to stories. We're listening to people's stories all of the time. And I think Goldilocks is one of those good stories. Goldilocks is a story about getting the balance right. And I think over these pandemic times, these really difficult times, it's been really difficult to get the balance right. And so if you haven't experienced one of those too much moments over the last 2 years, then I would put you in a very unusual category. What I actually hope to do is to just drop a little pebble in the pond. And I think a lot of us are doing this on the conference presentations because we haven't got time to look into this in a huge amount of detail. But I'd just love to just drop that pebble in the pond and just see where the ripples go, where the ripples take you, and hopefully it will keep rippling for a way down the track. Now, I think possibly there are actually more sensing people on this this particular session than I was expecting, because normally we don't have many sensing people. But I love your intuiting, guys. You know, all of those with an intuiting preference, you're fantastic. You know, I love the way your minds work. I love the way you think. But oh my goodness, you make things quite complicated. So as an ESTJ in the type community, I feel that I have a role to fulfill. And my role is just to make things a little bit simpler, a little bit more clear, and give things a little bit of maybe a practical touch, but leave that complexity in there. I call it simplexity, just keeping it simple, but really still honoring the complexity of the model. So I have a little bit of a plan for you. Of course, I have a plan. My preferences are ESTJ, so as you can assume, my plan is quite detailed. So I'm going to be giving you an introduction. We'll be looking at the perceiving functions. Then we'll do breakout rooms for 10 minutes where you'll have your own conversations. We'll debrief for 10 minutes, and then we'll look at the judging functions and do the same thing. Have breakout rooms, debrief, and then hopefully some Q&A at the end. And if I manage to finish in time, then trust me, I'll be having some bubbles and going hurrah, just to celebrate the achievement. So I want to give a little bit of a shout out to a podcaster who I really enjoy. Some of you might have come across her before. Her name is Elizabeth Day, and she has a marvelous podcast, which you can find anywhere that you normally get your podcasts online, which is called How to Fail. And she was interviewing somebody not too long ago, and she was saying that we are all flawed. We all have these cracks within us. But funnily enough, the more cracks we have, the more we can fill them with life lessons. And for any of you that were on Jane Kesey's session, she was saying, make friends with your stress, because actually it's in the filling of these cracks that we really get to learn and grow. And sometimes those cracks become quite strong. They become stronger than the original material. So we do all grow and learn as we try and get over our difficulties and the areas of us that are flawed. But we also have these amazing superpowers. And I think type really does help us to explain those superpowers. And sometimes our superpower is to know our weaknesses or our blind spots and to not be scared of them. And sometimes our superpowers are to know your strengths and to use them wisely. And I think that's the life of a type practitioner, isn't it? Is to help people understand their strengths so that they can truly use them wisely. And for the most part, our strengths, our superpowers are invisible. You can't see them on somebody who's coming towards you. They are not obvious. We don't all go around with our type code tattooed on our forehead. Maybe that's a good thing. It would certainly be helpful from time to time if we did, but we don't. So the superpowers that we have are often well and truly hidden until we open up those doors to help people really understand exactly what they are. So I'm going to be looking at what I call the 8 sides of psychological type. I often call this living in the octagon, trying to work out what all these 8 sides of type are. And just a little bit of a heads up, when I'm doing workshops covering the 8 preferences, which I do E, I, S, N, T, F, and J and P. But I love the cognitive processes. I love the Jungian functions, but instead of calling them extroverted sensing, introverted sensing, and really confusing the life out of people, I just say to them, let's see how these letters combine. And that seems to work a lot better. So I can explain sensing and intuition, and then I can say, well, let's see how those letters combine with the last letter in the type code: SP, SJ, NP, NJ, TJ, TP, FJ, and FP. I'm always using symbols. For those who've known me for quite a while, you will know that I use icons and symbols all of the time in my work. So let's just go through a few of those. So we've got that experiencing, knowing what's going on in the moment. You see those juggling hands, you know where every single one of those balls is. You've got your eye on the ball all of the time. You're living in the moment. You've got the recalling, this beautiful USB stick, which just has that memory bank. We're just storing information. We've got NP. Now, I think Dario really introduced the idea of our NPs being our brainstorming Christmas tree brains with the flashing lights. I'm going to change that image later on, and I'll explain why. And then NJ, that visioning. So by comparison, the SJs and the NJs, that particular function is a slow burn. You know, you'll find that the SPs and the MPs kind of work work much more quickly. The SJ and the NJ is a slow burn. For those of you who were at James Johnston's presentation, he said there's something quite similar about the SJ and the NJ, or introverted sensing and introverted intuiting. And I think that's what it is. It has a slower speed. And then we've got the evaluating functions, the decision-making functions, TJ. I love that Sudoku puzzle. This happens to be my brain. It does work like a Sudoku puzzle. It is systematic. It does logically put things in one order and the other. So systematizing, I don't really like that word, but I have to say it does explain what extroverted thinking is about, which is quite different to introverted thinking, or the TP, which is just process. Questions, questions, analyzing, putting a whole lot of questions through the funnel, and hopefully coming out with a whole load more questions at the end, and then repeating it and putting them through and through. And then we have the FJs, extroverted feeling, that harmonizing, let me take care of you. Let me take care of the other, sometimes more than yourself. And then we have the tuning fork, which is an image I absolutely love for introverted feeling, which is, does this resonate with you? Whoa, does this resonate? And that is your search. You're seeking for that resonating. Does this jangle? Or does it go, sorry, my singing is not so good, but you know what I mean. Does it make a perfect noise? And you can sense it all through your life. You're looking for that resonance. Of course, once we know our type, we will know that very frequently we go on autopilot. We just turn up and we use whatever functions that come easily to us, which is usually our dominant and perhaps our auxiliary function. But it's not always the best look. Sometimes we need to grab hold of that wheel and steer the vehicle in a completely different direction. And that's often when we learn the most. So the Goldilocks rule is looking at too much, too little, and just right. What happens with each of these functions when we use them too much, too little, and just perfectly? Here's another image that I rather like, and I have to confess that through the pandemic, my wine glass was rather full. Don't know about yours. I'm hoping that some of you might have a glass of wine in front of you. The too much on the left-hand side, the too little, yes, that definitely needs a bit of a top up on the right-hand side. And then perhaps the just right in the middle there. Now, when our dominant function gets away with us, it's a little bit like this. We've sort of lost control. The horse has bolted. We haven't got access to any sort of steering instruments. And we also know that at this point, nothing good is really going to happen. Okay, this is not a particularly good look. But we also know that being human beings, we are very unlikely to be completely perfect in this world. You know, if we are trotting our way around the dressage arena of life, we're not really likely to have the perfect rising trot all the time, or the perfect extending trot all the time, or heaven knows, actually complete a flying change perfectly at any given moment. So that's not likely to happen. We're not likely to live life like this, but possibly we're somewhere in between. And the somewhere in between is kind of getting it right most of the time, moving forward. I think Brene Brown calls it rumbling. You're sort of rumbling with it. And just we've got sort of motion. It's not going to be perfect. We've got a little bit of control, but we are just aiming to keep things on track. So what we're going to do first is look at the perceiving functions, experiencing, recalling, brainstorming, and visioning. Now, for those of you who, dare I mention, it might be those of you with a sensing preference, will have noticed that my extroverted intuiting icon has just changed to a pinball machine. Now, I've done that on purpose because what I have found over the years is that the NFPs really love the Christmas tree brain, and the NTPs really love the icon of the pinball machine. And I don't say that the pinball machine sort of stays as it is, because there's a lot of what ifing about extroverted intuiting. And so the what if in this case is, what if you had a pinball machine and it was 3 times this size? What if you had multiple balls all spinning around this pinball machine all at the same time, and one ball connects with another ball, and then, oops, here's another idea. That is more like that sort of brainstorming, that brainstorming brain. And as I say, the NTPs like this. I came across, I think I was listening to one of Personality Hackers podcasts, and somebody was being interviewed, and they described that NP brain as ricocheting. And I think that's a lovely way of looking at that NP brain. Their ideas are simply just ricocheting around their minds. So there is a very big difference between these 2 different ways of experiencing sensing. That S&P, extroverted sensing, experiencing, in the moment, active, busy, out there, and the S and J, that just storing of information and memories. They're all USB sticks, these little keys that we've got in here. The keys to all sorts of things is in our memory banks. As are the 2 very different ways of experiencing intuiting, that brainstorming brain, that fast moving brain, and then that slow burn, that visioning. Let me just drop a seed and let it incubate, and then let's sort of quietly see what emerges. So with this in mind, what I have done is I've taken each of those preferences and I've given them an explanation and a quote on what happens when you use these functions too much, too little, and just right. Nicholas, is the link in the chat?
Yes, it is. I dropped it into the chat. I'll drop, for those of you who just joined, I'll do it again because I'm not sure they can.
Okay.
If you just joined, you might not be able to see it.
Okay, so for those of you who might not have access to this, feel free to take a photograph of it because you'll be using this in your chat room in just one moment. I'll just leave it on there for a few seconds. If you want to just give me or Nicholas a thumbs up to say that you're okay with either one of those things. Good, Sarah's good. Okay, all right, I think we're pretty good. If anyone isn't good, let me know. Okay, so here is your task. So in your groups, we've got 12 people, it's probably including us, isn't it, Nicholas? So perhaps I'll leave you to decide how you do that, with groups of approximately 3. Share your own evaluating superpower. Are you aware of moments when you move into the too much zone? And what's your story? So again, please take a photo of those questions or make a note of them. And then when you get into your groups, that's what you'll be doing. So sharing your own evaluating superpower. Are you aware of moments when you move into the too much zone? As I mentioned, in this pandemic era, It's very unlikely you didn't do that at some point. What's your story? And then prepare to share one comment from your group. Before we do that, though, I'd just like to introduce you to my alter ego, which is Mary Poppins. For those of you who might think that Mary Poppins isn't an ESTJ, we need to talk. I can seriously tell you that my belief is that Mary Poppins is an ESTJ. And my ESTJ instructions to you are Spitspot. We haven't got long for this, so you will only have 10 minutes. So after 9 minutes, you will get a 1 minute warning. So there we go, people. Is everybody happy with that? And then Nicholas, if you could get people into groups.
Are we doing just the perceiving functions or both?
No, you're only doing the perceiving functions at the moment, Marky. We'll be doing the evaluating ones just afterwards.
Okay, I'm just going to pause the recording for now. Just bear with me.
Okay, let me know when they're all back, Nicholas, because I can't see everyone on my screen.
Sorry, Andy and Cameron, I didn't mean to leave the group when I did. I just suddenly disappeared.
Yeah,
No worries.
No worries, everyone's back.
Great. Okay, so often I find in type conferences that this is where the gold happens. I would love to have been a fly on the wall at all of your conversations, so I hope you'll be able to share something. But before we do that, let me just take you through each of these preferences and some quotes and some images that I hope are going to help you. So let me just get here. Okay, so SP, the extroverted sensing, too much. Engaging in risky behaviors. I'm bored, I'll shake things up a little. Thankfully, we have an ESFP with us, Nicholas, we're glad to have you here. Too little, if you don't have access to this function, missing or ignoring what's going on around it. I just didn't see it. Unbelievable to somebody who has extroverted sensing, that you just didn't spot it. And then when it's just right, enjoying the present. I'm satisfied with my current situation. And I have to say that the word satisfied is not really good enough for the ESTPs and the ESFPs. They would have probably delighted, excited, energized by, like, you know, having a zippy-doo-dah day, whatever it is. But when you're looking at ISTPs and ISFPs as well, and they sort of sit with this contentment in a different way to the extroverted sensing. I love this meme, be warned, I'm bored, this could get dangerous. Or Winston Churchill. Now, I actually think that Winston Churchill was an ESTP. My lovely colleague Jane Kesey wanted me to read a book which was excellent. I can thoroughly recommend it. It was called The Sublime and the Vile. And her sort of task for me was to see if I could work out Winston Churchill's type. And it was as evident as anything within the first 2 chapters that he had ESTP preferences. And these were his last words. The words on his deathbed was, I'm so bored with it all. He was done. He was truly, life was obviously about to end. Looking at the SJs, being stuck in the past and scared to move forward. I can't get over it. We can just get stuck with something that we can't shift in our psyche or in our mentality. It just is stuck in our craw. Too little, failing to learn from the past. I keep falling in the same traps. There I go again. Oh my goodness, you think I would have learned from that before, but no, here it is. And just right, using past experiences to enhance life. I'm guided by my past and don't let it stop me moving forward. So my image for you here is dear Pooh Bear with all of his friends. Pooh Bear is clearly stuck. I don't know if you remember the story, but he goes to Rabbit's house and he has far too much honey and he gets so fat that he can't get through the hole. So after that, what happens is he gets some help from his friends. Now, being stuck in the past is like walking forward with your back facing the front. You'll miss out on what's in front of you. And what people with introverted sensing need when they are feeling this little bit stuck is someone to just do what Kanga and Rue are doing. Give us flowers, give us some time, be a little bit patient, tell us it's going to be all right. And you won't have to wait that long. You don't have to wait for us to slim down. It's not going to take months. We don't mind change, but change has to have it has to have certain conditions for us to accept it. With the MPs, too much. We were talking about that in our group, getting overwhelmed with too many options. I can't narrow the field. I've got too many ideas ricocheting around my head. Too little, failing to see opportunities. I see no possibilities, not only for me, but actually at all. And when they're at their best, being energized by multiple ideas that enable innovation. I am at my best when my mind is at play. Now, normally I talk through slides, but I'm just going to let you have a look at this one. And I'm sure you get the point. And then finally, the NJs, introverted intuiting, living in a dream state. I can't make sense of my imaginings. You just can't land anything. Things just seem to be slipping through your fingers. Too little, insisting on physical evidence. If I can't see it, it isn't true. And just right, taking an innate knowing and communicating it well. I think sometimes the difficulty with those who have NJ preferences is to not only have the vision, but to be able to explain it, especially to somebody who has a sensing preference. I trust my hunches and follow through on them. I'm committed, I'm clear, I've got this straight in my mind. And here's my quote for introverted intuiting. I tried to catch some fog, but I missed. So I would love to hear from you if you'd like to unmute. We've only got a little bit of time for you to tell us a couple of examples, and then we'll go on to the evaluating decision. We were a little bit late starting, so hopefully we can go a tiny bit over. So anyone like to unmute and make a comment on what you were saying in your groups?
Yeah, I can do for us. I think we concluded that we're at best when we're at play.
Yeah.
And actually taking that literally as an SJ might, it isn't at play in what we're doing, it's actually being at play.
Being at play is where the work is done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. I think I've told this story before, but someone said to me once in a meeting, let's all do some blue sky thinking. And I said, really? Just wake me up when you've finished. But you're quite right. Any other comments?
I thought it was really lovely. Andy made a wonderful comment that it's not so much bored, it's the stagnation.
Yeah.
That has him want to shake things up, and that was a lovely distinction. And I think we had 2 NJs and 1 SP, and the NJs, I think what we were looking at was can't make any sense of our imaginings. It's more of a when there's somebody when the external world wants me to make sense of a lot of new information, that's when I can't make sense of it. When there's a demand for me to quickly take in a lot of new information and then make some sense of it or usefulness out of it, that's when I get it's too much.
Yeah. And very frequently, Marky, it's just time.
Yeah, exactly.
You just need to leave me alone. Yeah.
The slow burn was a really lovely insight to that introverted intuition. And I think also introverted sensing.
Yeah, absolutely. They both have that. They have a similar quality, I think, in that sense. I'm going to move on, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to chat afterwards, and I'm happy to continue chatting beyond the session as well. So we'll see how we go. Let's do exactly the same thing with the decision-making processes. So let's take a look at those. How does the information in your mind flow in order to come to a decision? So that's how I explain the evaluating processes, and we are going to use all of them, but the time and energy component that's available to us is going to be different for each of these functions. So TJ and TP, extremely different, 2 very different ways of experiencing thinking. That T and J, system building, that logical, if I've got something up here, then I can match it with something down there, just looking at the logic and placing things externally in our world, compared to that TMP, analyzing, looking at the questions, looking at more questions, really just seeing what the process is and have you got the perfect questions to answer it. And then 2 very different ways of experiencing, harmonizing, let me take care of you, very much so. And F&P, valuing, as I mentioned before, bing, does it feel right? Does that feel right? So yet again, here she comes again, dear old Mary Poppins. You haven't got too long. Let me just think. probably about 7 minutes on this one, if that's okay. So we'll get back into groups just so that we can finish on time.
7 minutes, okay.
Yeah, if you haven't got the handout, then please take a photo of it so that you can have your conversation. And yet again, in your groups, share your own evaluating superpower. Are you aware of moments when you move into the too much zone? And what's your story? And prepare to share one comment from your group. So there it is again. So if you'd like to get us into our groups, Nicholas, that would be great.
Just bear with me. Let me just pause the recording.
Okay, sure. So this extroverted thinking, the TJs, as I mentioned before, the shooting all over everybody, taking over and exerting pressure. You don't have extroverted thinking. You can just ignore the inefficiencies. I'm not engaged enough to care. But when it works perfectly and beautifully, calmly, I love this, calmly mobilizing resources towards an optimal result. I like an effective system that is mutually beneficial. It does actually suit the other people as well. And here's my lovely little fella. I'm not bossy, I just know what you should be doing. So just letting you know that extroverted thinking starts young. Okay. If you happen to have a child who's got these preferences, they're likely to treat you like staff. So just watch out. For the introverted thinking, as we've already mentioned, obsessively analyzing, I believe everything I think. But failing to use extroverted thinking is equally problematic. I just didn't think it through. I did not have the right questions at my fingertips to make this decision or to make this choice. And at its best, I'm at my best when my mind is engaged in investigation. Heavens, they are the world's best researchers, I believe. And here's my lovely image. I overthink to the point where I'm thinking about not overthinking. So that might happen to you, Daniel. And then for the FJs, as we've already said, exhausting yourself meeting the needs of the people, but not having extroverted feeling is ignoring the impact of your actions. I know this hurts, but it's the only way. But doing it right, as we were talking earlier, Marky, is finding a solution that not only meets the needs of everybody. I willingly provide support if it meets the needs of everyone involved, including you. It really has to, and I think that's a maturity issue. You get to understand what that means and eliminate situations from your life where that's not possible. And then, so for the extroverted feeling, do not confuse the command to love with the disease to please. And finally, for the FPs, which we've just been thinking about, that just right is living a meaningful life which resonates with my values. I feel that I have taken the right life path. Every presentation should have a cute animal. Okay, so for those with introverted feeling, just because they're looking really cute, it doesn't mean there isn't something brewing going on inside there. There is a tantrum brewing in me, the likes of which this house has never seen. And then another one, you cannot become a peacemaker without communication. So it's being able to communicate that intense feeling that you have so that you can actually form a solution and get to the end to get the result that you need, which is world peace, just making things as peaceful as you can. So there we have it, everybody. All of those superpowers in Goldilocks format, too much, too little, and just right. And a reminder about these superpowers. Key messages: it is not our job to make them all equal. It is our job to create the space to own what we do naturally and to open up to develop other aspects of ourselves. Be conscious, become aware, and be self-directed. There we go. So thank you all. It's been great to have a chat. I'm very happy. Are we almost on time? Oh my goodness, 8:57. I've got 3 minutes. Yay!
Perfectly project planned, Sue.
Champagne now.
Yeah, champagne, definitely. So if you'd all like to unmute and we can just have a bit of a chat about that, about anything else that might come to mind or anything that you found helpful or would like to ask me about, or would like to ask anyone in the group here about, you know, what it might be like to have a dominant function that isn't yours. So please unmute and we'll have a bit of a chat.
I really appreciate